Dropzone was a huge success for one Archer MacLean in 1984. Originally developed for the Atari 8-bit line of computers, it was ported over to the Commodore 64 shortly afterwards. It seems this made him a rich man, especially after US Gold illegally stopped paying him royalties after 18 months. You'd think that wouldn't make him a rich man, but fortunately he took him to court and they later settled. The story goes that he used the proceeds from that to buy his first Ferrari. Yes, his first Ferrari. I don't own a C64 or an 8-bit Atari computer, only a 16-bit one, but luckily it did see a few ports to home consoles, one of those being the Super Nintendo. Released in 1994, being published by Psygnosis and developed by Eurocom, it's here called Archer MacLean's Super Dropzone. Although only called Dropzone in the main menu, it's more of a reboot rather than a full-blown sequel. It now includes boss fights, new weapons, and upgraded graphics. So overall, a good time. So, without further ado, let's get into the specifics. The narrative goes that you're a human in a jetpack, defending Jupiter's moons from an alien attack. There are scientists that need saving, here represented by Pokeballs that roll about, and the aim is to scoop them up and deposit them at the research base before the alien critters get to them. This is all represented through pre-rendered scenes on the main menu. These look nice, but don't really explain much. Thankfully, I have the internet, but hopefully the original instruction manual clarified things if you cared about the storyline. Each level is a different moon and is laid out in a long and horizontal fashion that scrolls and loops in on itself. This is handy later on to defeat the bosses, which drift either left or right. This way you can attack them from behind and not have to constantly keep moving backwards as you harass them. It certainly looks like an 80s microcomputer shooter in the way it's laid out. As you can see, most of the screen real estate is taken up by the playfield, but the bottom quarter is taken up by a control panel of sorts that includes a minimap of the whole playfield, showing where the enemies are. This is super handy in the harder levels, where the screen will just fill up with them. Otherwise, other helpful nuggets of information are displayed, like your score, how many scientists are left to save, and how many you've lost, arrows pointing towards the nearest savee, as well as metrics on how many lives and bombs are left. The controls, by design, are floaty. It's more or less the main quirk of the gameplay, as a jetpack doesn't allow you to hover in one place for very long. You're constantly adjusting your position, kind of like in that Flappy Bird game from a few years ago, and this certainly leads to heated battle sequences where there are aliens attacking you from all directions. To defend yourself, there is a range of samey weapons that can be collected by defeating certain enemies. They'll also occasionally drop extra lives, as well as bombs that will clear everything on the screen. You'll definitely need to use those strategically during harder levels. As for the enemies themselves, there is a range of critters intent on making you explode. Some are very simple, slow and large, making them easy targets, while on the other end of the spectrum, smaller and much faster enemy types are super difficult to shoot and will actively seek you out and chase you around the screen. It only takes one hit to lose a life, and the twitchy nature of the controls makes sudden, enraging deaths quite common. The boss fights are a nice touch, however, since they're not included in the original releases, although there are only a handful of types that are recycled throughout the game. Once you figure those out, it will just be a process of going through the motions to defeat them at the end of each round. As you can probably see, Super Dropzone is not an easy game. The insta-kills are relentless, and the limited lives are not restocked often. There is a password system for some resemblance of progression, but since this is an arcade game through and through, it's not really a huge issue. The later playfields are almost identical, just with differing graphics. Now, I'm sure no one will think less of you if you decide to utilize the unlimited lives cheat just to see the other levels. Many shooters of that period offered that anyway, so don't feel like a heathen. And I would want to see those later levels if I was you, because Super Dropzone is a very sexy looking game. The background art looks great on the SNES, and the parallax scrolling has been well implemented. It's certainly the first aspect of the game that will catch your eye as you start playing. There are plenty of other neat touches too, like when you explode. It may be infuriating, but since you see it a lot, it's nice that it's such a cool effect. And while there is no music except for a dramatic but basic tune in the main menu, the sound design overall is quite pleasant on the old eardrums. Shooters like this can sound very repetitive, especially when there is a lot of action on the screen, but there's enough variation here to not get annoying. That's probably possible because there is no music actually. And as an added bonus, there's also a selection of voice audio, which is always nice on older games such as this. Dropzone has also been ported to the NES, the Game Boy, and the Game Gear. This enhanced version is also available on the PS1 and the Game Boy Advance with the subheading Intergalactic Rescue Mission. Although, like this SNES version, was only ever available in PAL regions. So, sorry, the majority of my viewership, but if you want to play this, you'll have to import it and mod your SNES. As for MacLean himself, he's well known for developing the game International Karate, as well as a series of games based around pool and snooker. He's also founded several game development studios over the years. I wonder how many Ferraris he owns now.